Hi, my name is Alexandria Packard, and today I would like to start off by just briefly asking you all to think for just a moment about a time where maybe as a teacher, as a student, a parent, or even just a member of society, when you had the opportunity to work with children, and you maybe dealt with a child who was just very energetic, a little bit more energetic than some of your other students. Maybe had a hard time focusing on things, couldn't complete tasks, very talkative, maybe just a little bit off the walls. Now, a lot of us can maybe think about and pull out a memory of dealing with somebody like that, whether either as children ourselves having friends like that. Now, a lot of us, especially back then, would think, well, those children are just being children. But believe it or not, a lot of children these days are being diagnosed with ADD and ADHD, and some of these children are going undiagnosed entirely. According to the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, they released information that shows the increased amount of students being diagnosed with ADD and ADHD. In 2003, the number was 7.8%. In 2007, that went up to 9.5%, and in 2011 went up to 11%. Now in 2016, approaching 2017, we can assume that's probably more about 13 or even 14%. The case study that I looked at that inspired me to talk to you all about ADD and ADHD is a case study about a boy named Gabe Silva who is going into the second grade and is being diagnosed with ADD and ADHD. This case study was among other case studies for students with exceptional needs. Now, Gabe Silva was with a teacher, Susan, who was starting her third year of teaching and was very distraught over the fact of maybe having a child with ADD or ADHD in her classroom. But as a matter of fact, that's becoming a huge commonality. Ellen Kingsley, an award-winning journalist and author of Attitude Magazine, all things ADD and ADHD related, made a statement that 1 to 3 students per average of a 30-student classroom has ADD or ADHD. She also shared with us that 65% of these students end up having behavioral issues such as defiance and hostility against authority, 45% suspension rate, 30% failing a grade or having to repeat, and 35% dropping out entirely. Now, this is a really big problem, and of course, any teacher would be concerned about these numbers, and granted, that's why Susan in my case study was probably worried on how to handle this. When speaking with Gabe's parents in my case study, Gabe's parents were very distraught and really did not want to get their child diagnosed with any label because they didn't want to think anything was wrong with them. And despite the fact that, parents don't have to, the Prohibition on Mandatory Medications Act Amendment of 2004 requires that parents or don't have to medicate their children in order for them to attend public schools. So it's not necessarily that his parents felt or that they had to get medicated, but it was also the school's priority to tell them that your child doesn't have to be put on medication, but that we can help them. As a matter of fact, Section 504 of the Vocational and Rehabilitation Act of 1976 and the Individuals with Disabilities Act of 1997 ensures free and appropriate education for students with ADD and ADHD. This means that as future educators, or educators, established educators, and as educational systems, period, that we have the responsibility and the obligation to make sure that students with ADD and ADHD get the type of education that they should, regardless of whether or not they're on medication. And this means incorporating instructional activities that require flexibility on the teacher's part and includes classroom enhancements, better direct instruction, differentiated instruction, etc. And this is something that after reading my case study, the teacher Susan did not really seem to have a good grip on, which makes me think that we need to also increase better pre-service education for our future educators. So that way when our educators are entering the workforce, after establishing their niche after a couple years, we don't get completely thrown off every time we have to deal with a student that has ADD or ADHD. Considering that, as Ellen Kingsley did say, 1 to 3 students are going to have ADD or ADHD, we're almost guaranteed as educators to every year handle or come across a student or students that have these sorts of issues. Now, even though the National Institute of Health Consensus made a statement saying that we do not have an independent valid test for ADHD and therefore is no data to indicate that ADHD is due to brain malfunction, the CCHR issued a statement that 8.4 million children actually are on psychiatric drugs. But despite the amount of students that are being put on medication, the AAP guidelines, the American Academy of Pediatric Guidelines, states that behavioral therapy is actually the first and recommended line of defense. So to me, this means that as educators, we need to be working with parents, and parents need to be working with educators to embrace allowing your children to be diagnosed and to embracing the instructional activities and behavioral therapy activities that schools should be and can be providing for students without making parents feel like they have to medicate their children. So after offering this information to you all, I hope that maybe we can all learn to maybe work together to promote um, better academic excellence and just better educational experiences for both parents, teachers, and students working with ADD and ADHD in the future. Thank you for letting me share.